Hope you're well. Welcome to another session of computer architecture. And today we're going to be looking at chapter number 28, which is securing your computer systems. If you remember well, this particular chapter then concludes learning unit number 4. So what we'll do, I think we're going to be splitting this particular or these particular sessions into 2 or 3 parts. And then once we conclude the actual chapter and subsequently the learning unit, we'll backtrack to learning unit number 3 and then ultimately conclude with learning unit number 5 as far as module content is concerned. So this particular chapter has got 3 distinctive learning outcomes. Remember, the idea is just understanding how to appropriately secure our computer systems and the actual content that is stored within them. So the first thing in terms of the learning units that we're going to be looking at is arguably explaining the different threats to computer systems and the data. Now remember, I think one of the other things we mentioned when we were still running face-to-face sessions is, or one of the questions that I posed to the class was, what is the most expensive, or what do you think is the most expensive component as far as computer systems are concerned? And if you remember well, we had a whole host of answers from the floor, with a couple of you mentioning probably the hard drive, probably the graphics card, probably the CPU. And technically, I think most answers were delving within the hardware part of it. And remember, my answer to that specific question within my own perspectives was looking at data as the most expensive component. Why? Because the data can never be replaced. If you look at that's ultimately what my thinking was around that. Because if you look at your phone as an argument, you typically use that phone to capture images, to take videos, and more often than not, these images or videos are within your own personal spaces or capacities. So ultimately, it could be a graduation, it could be a birthday, it could be images or videos of a newborn, as an argument. Imagine if you don't have a backup, if you haven't uploaded this to the cloud, or you don't have a backup of that backup, and all these physical platforms where you store this content is stolen. You ultimately don't have any content anymore, and it adversely affects our own existence within that particular environment there. So arguably, this particular data, as expensive as it is, or maybe to be more specific or to be more appropriate, as priceless as it is, it's ultimately important for us to understand what are the type of threats that are typically associated with that distinctive data, as well as the whole concept of the gadgets that house that particular data. The other thing that you want to look at as the second learning outcome is arguably describing key security concepts and technologies. Now, remember, these ones are the ones that you'll then use to try and circumvent problems encountered within the threat issue. And the third learning outcome is now looking at how you would, or explaining how to protect your computer systems against these common threats there. So those are your 3 learning outcomes as far as your particular chapter is concerned. And what we're going to be delving into today is just analyzing the threats that are out there. So there's 6 distinctive threats that you need to familiarize yourself with. Remember, it's imperative for you to actually understand the threats so that you can provide a distinctive solution for circumventing those threats as an argument. So one of the first ones is unauthorized access. All right, and normally when you discuss unauthorized access, it's all about gaining access to resources without permission. And remember, these resources range from your data to applications, all the way to the actual hardware associated with your computing platforms. And you've got ways in which individuals or institutions, organizations tend to try and gain access to your environments or your data or your computer systems in an unauthorized fashion. And one of them is what they call dumpster diving. Now, we all know that a dumpster is a bin or is a trash can, as an argument. And more often than not, we tend to throw away content or to discard content in a very nonchalant or casual way. And ultimately, what this means is that you've got a bill, probably that you got a credit card statement, or just a paper probably that you've written sensitive or very delicate information. You just tend to throw it in the bin. But you'll be surprised, and it's quite interesting, the amount of information that someone can gather about you as an individual or about you as an organization just by going through your trash. So it's ultimately imperative for you to make sure that you discard this particular trash or these documents in a proper fashion. And normally you'd use a shredder for that, just to avoid obviously you being exposed detrimentally as far as sensitive information is concerned. So dumpster diving is just a process, or just a whole behavior of someone going through your trash just to gain information about you, and normally that information is quite sensitive. So even if you look at discarding credit cards, I think most of the banking institutions would actually advocate for you to destroy that card appropriately. So either with the scissors, just to make sure that no one gets access to your sensitive information there. Because even if that card is no longer valid or has expired, certain individuals can still be able to gain access to your accounting systems there, just by going through or just by accessing the information on that distinctive card. So that's one of them. The other one is what they call shoulder surfing, and this one normally is probably more relevant, especially when you're within confined or public spaces. So say you're in a cafe and you're sitting there enjoying your coffee, and you probably are delving into your online banking space there. This is when someone looks over your shoulder to check for your keystrokes, or to check the electronic credentials that you're incorporating within a specific system, and then obviously use that information at a later stage to obviously illegally gain access to those given environments there. So normally be quite aware of the environments that you're in. Again, I think I've mentioned this before, some of the behaviors might seem borderline paranoia, but ultimately it's quite imperative for you to make sure that you safeguard yourself against some of these issues there. The other thing that you also might want to look at in terms of the way in which individuals or organizations tend to access systems or environments, especially within the ICT space, in an unauthorized fashion, is using what they call social engineering. So this is a way of manipulating an individual to typically give you their own personal information. So usernames and passwords, pins, account numbers, the list will go on and on. And it's important to identify what social engineering is, and probably what are the kind of ways in which people can try, and organizations can try and manipulate you to release your sensitive info. And one of those would include infiltration. All right. And remember, with infiltration, you're looking at tailgating as an example, where someone follows you into a specific establishment. They don't have authorized access. They don't have a access card. They just follow you in. So they're right behind you. They follow you into a specific establishment, and arguably gain access to that given environment. So one of the other ways in which most institutions try and safeguard themselves against the whole concept of tailgating is to use an architect, or more or less a concept known as the man trap. And with this one, normally I think most of you have experienced this, especially when you walk into a banking hall as an argument, where you've got two distinctive doors, and between those doors, there's a small space that is in there. That's what they call a man trap. So there's a door right at the outside, so the one that connects the bank or that institution to the outside, and then you've got another door between that then enables you to directly gain access into the establishment. So between that, like I was saying, there's a small space, and normally what happens is you open the door, You wait for the door behind you to close. Once it's successfully closed, then the other door enables you to gain access to the establishment. So that's what they call a man trap. So normally there's a limit in terms of the number of individuals that can be within that man trap. And yes, as you'd guessed it, it's just one individual in most instances. And obviously there's normally a security or there's security personnel there right at the doors just to monitor what is actually happening in terms of individuals gaining access to, within the actual institution and obviously exiting. So that's another concept there. Another thing that you also need to take cognizance of is telephone scams, and I think this is within the same confines as what they call phishing as well, where you get a phone call, someone asks for your credentials, and normally they sound quite genuine in certain instances, and I think you'll discover that a lot of banking institutions for years on end now have been sending comms out to state that, look, we would never ask for your electronic or any personal information over the phone, and as arguably obvious as that sound, it's always the oldest tricks in the books that tend to work. So it's important for you to understand that it can happen to anyone, and it's important, again, like I had mentioned a couple of moments ago, just to be very aware of your surroundings, very alert or very vigilant, just to avoid you being a victim or falling prey to some of these shenanigans. So that's unauthorized access. The second one you might want to also consider is what they call data destruction. And remember, this can either be intentional or unintentional. And it's important to understand that that arguably or relatively expensive component, which is your data, can be exposed to these particular issues. And I think this is where some architectures like your RAID that we've discussed before come into the foray there. So remember, RAID is your redundant array of inexpensive or independent disks. And it's that fault-tolerant architecture that is used to just try and safeguard your data, just in case your actual physical components that store that data tend to crash or fail. I think you also discover that one of the other threats that you also need to safeguard against is the catastrophic failure of your specific hardware components there. So the second one is data destruction. The third would be what they call administrative access, where normally a lot of tech-savvy individuals would then take advantage of some of the flaws that are incorporated within operating systems as an argument to then obviously gain access to a system. Remember, most of these systems are not 100% configured or secure. So ultimately, there are certain flaws that most individuals that are typically clued within those particular environments use to gain access to the system. And then we can also discuss the fourth one now, which is the catastrophic failure of your hardware components. And again, one of the interesting ones within as a subcategory as far as this particular threat is concerned is physical theft. I think most of us would tend to think that, okay, look, if I look at my smartphone, if you look at my smartphone, or if you look at my a laptop as an argument, I've got a biometric architectures incorporated. Remember, biometrics is using or technology or architecture that uses a human being's unique physical characteristics to gain access to a specific system or environment. So this could be your fingerprint readers or your fingerprint scanners, your voice recognition platforms, your retina scanners. You can also even discuss palm readers or face recognition architectures as well. So you've got all that incorporated, and you probably have a very complex password. But we always tend to forget that someone can just up and leave with my gadget. So your gadget can be stolen, and once it's stolen, that particular individual or institution has enough time to try and crack all that architecture that you've put in place. So it's important to also take heed of that fact there. And then the fifth one is malicious software or malicious code. Normally, this is any executable code that is designed or created to adversely affect your specific system. And more often than not, it's not just destruction of the data that is stored, but it's also usurping that particular data as well. So it's important to understand what malware is all about. Not all detriment is associated with malware, but it's very important to identify it and understand what are some of the mechanisms that you can put in place to try and safeguard your machine or your computing systems or your environments from an ITC perspective from these particular issues. And then lastly, we can also discover or discuss what they call environmental issues. So these are issues that or problems or threats that are sometimes beyond our control. So things like natural disasters as an argument, but some of them are. So when you look at the environments in which your gadgets function, you need to make sure that these are cooled appropriately, the environments are clean, just to avoid dirty air that can then affect our systems, and it's not humid, arguably, as far as these particular environments would go. So that's environmental threats there. So those are the six distinctive concepts you need to take heed of. I think if we go back to what I was discussing in terms of unauthorized access, in terms of the whole concept of dumpster diving with the password issue, we'll discuss this, I think, in the other part as well, what they call the password paradox, where I think I did give an example of people maybe writing passwords down and then throwing that away. And you see, the issue is, or why something like that might happen, is that you're sitting with several accounts. And as far as these accounts are concerned, I think I might have mentioned this before, that you probably have a Facebook account, you've got an Instagram account, you've got a Twitter account, you've got your online banking, you've got the VC Learn platform. And it's normally advocated for you to have different complex passwords for each one of these accounts. I mean, to properly secure you on the online platform. But as human beings, what is the thing we tend to end up doing? We either have one password for all of these accounts, complex password, or not, just to avoid us forgetting. Or if we do end up having different passwords for each one of these accounts, we end up maybe writing these passwords down somewhere. And it's quite important to identify and understand the fact that if wherever you've written that password is jeopardized, then obviously your online existence becomes quite a problem in that distinctive perspective. So it's important to identify some of the other behaviors or some of the other traits that we need to familiarize ourselves with, just to make sure that we secure ourselves as far as our online existence, as well as our distinctive gadgets are concerned. So the next time we'll have session, we'll discover the whole concept and discuss what is happening as far as security concepts and technologies that are out there to try and safeguard ourselves and our computing systems from detriment. And I think the other issue that we need to understand as well is just that I think we'll have a couple of I'll have a couple of questions that I'll post on Learn, just to look at understanding content appropriately, especially within this first part, in terms of analyzing threats that can be a bit problematic within the whole ICT space. So when you look at chapter number 28, I think just delve into and concentrate on the first section there, which is analyzing your threats, which is what we've mentioned in today's session. And then should there be any issues that you want me to attend to, please, as usual, just pop me a mail and then I'll respond. I'll do my best to try and respond within 24 hours to your distinctive issue there. So that is that, guys. Thanks for joining in. As usual, guys, please stay safe, stay positive, be of good spirits, and I'll see you in the next part as far as this particular chapter is concerned. Cheers.